Welcome back. We got another edit with me, and today on the docket is Tony Finau at the BMW Championship. So looking at the screen now, you can see it's a nice simple image of Tony Finau putting right before the ball is about to go into the hole, and we got a nice array of colors in the background, fans blurred out, but really just the main center of attention is on him and the focus is on him, so we can do some creative stuff to draw him out from the background and play a little bit with these green colors. First, to start off, we're just going to fix this temperature. As you can see, it's a little cool right now and a little pinkish, so we'll just introduce some heat and a little bit more greens into this, just slightly to get a baseline level. And then of course the next thing I always love to do is just straighten this out and get my crop down. So for this crop, we're going to keep it how it originally was, but just bring it in slightly tighter than original. Alright, next, as you can see, looking up here on the histogram, most of it details and information is on the left side of that histogram, meaning we have a lot of details in the shadows that we can bring out. So we're just going to raise the exposure slightly, but more importantly the shadows, and then introduce some contrast, which will again then spread those shadows out to the left and highlights out to the right. Again, this right side here, we're just trying to get the main adjustments correct. We're not worried so much about the fine tuning the colors or the exact lighting, because that's when masks will come in quite handy. Because as you can see, this green is a little bright. It kind of takes away from Tony Finau, and then we don't have a ton of differentiation in the colors between the fans and Tony Finau, so we're going to want to bring that out later in the masking process. But now, moving forward onto this tone curve, something I just like to do a little bit is, so we don't have those harsh highlights and shadows, is just bring them both up a little bit. This will again also help get some of those details out of shadows, but then just crush the harshest shadows and raise the harshest highlights just a little bit more to get that little bit of contrasty look. And then, so I don't ever like true darks in my image unless I'm going for that look where I want it to be just that pure, harsh contrast black look, and maybe sometimes in the black and white image. But if it's something like this, something simple, I'm just going to raise those shadows even more so we get that soft look. And now moving on to our colors, the biggest thing is this green. The green, especially in golf, is one of the major components of this image, so we have to make sure we really fine tune these details and this color into it, and we don't want to take all the way green, so we're going to actually raise this color a little bit because I love the color we have now, but this green specifically is a little too bright, so I could just lower the luminance for all of them. But the new feature in Adobe Lightroom is now I can color drop and just affect primarily that green instead of this green up in the trees that we want to almost match it to. So it's going to take out a lot of the luminance from there to take away from that distractingness, and then we're just going to change it here onto the green and lower the green a little bit so we have a more monochrome look for the green just slightly. Alright, now going back to some of these colors, I can see he has a lot of orange in his skin, so maybe just bumping that luminance a little bit so we can draw attention to him and we get some more details in him. And then another thing in golf with, of course, all those greens is there's going to be a lot of yellows attached to those greens, so any way we can play around with these yellows will also affect how the greens look in our image. You can see me going up and down the luminance and saturation slides, it does change a lot. So we're just going to lower the luminance slightly on the screen, but I do like the green look we have on here, so up the saturation just a little bit while detuning this luminance. And then you can see the blue affects this image a lot. And if you don't know what exactly is, whether it's aqua or blue, you can just always go up and down on these saturation sliders to see how drastically it changes. I do that quite a bit when editing my photos, but now I think we have a good baseline of what we want to do. So now we can start playing around with masks. So first we're just going to select the subject, and since it's such a clear image of Tony Finau, we'll do a pretty good job of getting him perfectly. And now we're just going to just bring him out from the background a little bit, raise his exposure. I see here that the highlights might be getting a little too hot, so we'll lower the highlights just a little bit and then raise the shadows so we could just get a little bit more details. We still want it to look like it's a natural picture. We don't want to look like we just placed them onto the background in Photoshop, so we still need to blend it in just a little bit, and we don't want his exposure to be too contrasty and contrarian to this background, but we can also add some more pop to him by just taking down the exposure and highlights of a background a bit. Now, like I mentioned before, I love the color in some of these fans' shirts, so we're just gonna go with a brush here and try to get out some more saturation and vibrance from these fans in the background to add color and pop to this image. Alright, moving forward next is I love how these two people in the shorts frame the ball, but I don't like how this is also the brightest part of the image. So we could just gonna create a linear gradient mask and kind of change the direction of this light ever so slightly by decreasing the exposure and highlights down here. See, we don't want to affect it too much, and since it's such an awkward angle, we might have to just add to this mask with a brush to kind of get rid of the brightness around him here. Alright, next up is then to just bring a little bit more light into the top of this image to get that gradient and redirect the light. You can see also it's bringing some more light onto the top of Tony Finau, which we love a lot. But also because we're redirecting this light, it's most likely we're trying to mimic sunlight. So a lot of times when I do this, let's try to introduce a little bit of warmth into the top of that image. Not a lot, but just a little bit to make it look like natural light. And then the final thing we're going to do, it's a pretty good image so far, is just that cinematic look that a lot of people like to go for, is a lot of teal in the shadows and those orange in the highlights. So we're just going to introduce those just ever so slightly into an image to get a little bit of that cinematic look. And you have to be careful because if you go a lot with the shadows, it can change the overall look and image feel. While the highlights, you have a little bit more wiggle room because it doesn't affect as much of the image propensity as the shadows do. But as you can see, we started off with just Tony Finau a little bit dark, underexposed, not corrected, and we finally ended up on this image of him. Just great colors, paying attention closely to the greens to make sure that they don't take away from Tony Finau, making sure we bring detail back into Tony Finau, and then also making sure we pay attention to the light source and how we can utilize masks to change that light to better frame Tony Finau into this image. So that's all we have for you today, from the beginning to the end. That's the edit of Tony Finau, and check back for more edits in the future.